Let's do some calls and questions in a second, but we got one more very online thing for us to do first. I'm not even trying to make it about this person. But I was going to see if I could set this up without introducing it, but no. Let's get to the source. There was big banana discourse on Twitter today about a subject that I care about a lot, which is a socialist future, which I find to be something that's very distinct from what people are calling degrowth, which I think has really been exposing itself as an ideology that is not very much reflective of the wants and desires and aspirations of working class people, but frankly, like a middle class guilt from academics and people who do media like I do about consumption in the West. Right. And I don't know. I don't even need to front load this too much. This is post game, so you guys all know the arguments here. And like, I mean, before we jump into this, like, the thing that gets me annoyed about degrowth at this point is there are like multiple threads. Like there is like the actual argument, and you can read that by reading like Degrowthers, like Hickel, like the folks who wrote The Future's Degrowth. You can listen to Matt Huber's interviews on this show. You can read his book, Climate Change is Class War. Or there's a whole like engagement of like thought and fighting that I think is like interesting, frankly, in this material. And like in that level, like I respect the opponents on that. And then there's this other kind of online discourse, which everybody participates in. No one's above it. But I find to be really, really stupid. And I think there's like a willingness sometimes from people who promote like degrowth as an idea to basically say that like people who reject degrowth, right? Which again, like I'm fine. Like I think it's really crucial that we never let this seem like it's hegemonic on the left. It is a very fringe movement pushed by a lot of people who are writing and stuff like that, but there's no real political movement behind it or anything of that nature. I think it does reflect some of the worst aspects of the environmental movement, things that we're trying to move past to actually build like a green future instead of these kind of like very moralistic, anti-worker, hostile to working class people that we've seen in the environmental movement. Anyways, you can read Matt Huber's book to get into that kind of stuff. So there's all that, and then there's this other one that I find is sort of like the stream here about this discourse, which is that degrowth people see that sometimes we waste and we have wasteful production, right? And what degrowth is saying is like, let's do less wasteful production, right? And that's what they own. So when you're arguing against degrowth, right, you're actually saying that like everything about American consumer society is great, right? That's not the case at all. Capitalism is an extremely wasteful system, right? I mean, goes back to Marx, right? One of the things about capitalism is that it actually created the conditions for like human-driven famines, right? A very famous famine that we all know is the Irish potato famine, right? But remember that wasn't a crisis. There were like environmental concerns that caused there to be issues with crop growing. But the entire time when people were literally starving in Ireland, they're exporting food from Ireland onto British markets, right? That is one of the most wicked and evil things about capitalism. This is why I'm a socialist, because I want a better life for working people, but I also recognize that capitalism is an inherently irrational system. So any socialist worth their salt, of course, sees that there are issues with production and distribution under capitalist society. And I really resent and I'm exhausted with this kind of things like, oh, well, if you don't think that we should enforce mass austerity on people, or also put up these ludicrous ideas that if consumption goes down in the West, it will necessarily go up in the global South. That's not true. Or this idea that, oh no, we've actually reached a certain level of productive capacity and we need to degrow. It's like, no, friend. Literally, people right now in this country, in the United States of America, are suffering under an incredible heat wave. We're going to need to build out more weatherized homes. We're going to need to build out more AC units. We're going to need to build out clean power, solar, wind, nuclear. That's going to mean tremendous amounts of growth. And then you want to start talking about the global South. I mean, this means mass investment, mass growth, mass production, right? And these are the things that we should be focusing on. But this is why I call degrowth really pessimistic, is that instead of saying like, what we need to do is build a political movement that can win, what we should do instead, so that we can achieve better lives for people, so that we can achieve more for people, rather it's not going to get any better. So basically, if we can pick the places where we can accept sacrifice, that's what we're going to do, right? It's a negative philosophy in that sense. Anyway, I front loaded too much, but it's my right. It's my show. Anyways, Malcolm Harris who wrote, pro-growth lefties accused their opponents of being out of touch with working class preferences and focused on consumption instead of production. But what do they imagine planting support looks like for, say, fresh bananas at every American 7-Eleven among the world's banana workers? I think we better get planting those pawpaw trees. That means fewer bananas for American workers. But if we're focused on production, not consumption, then the expropriation and suppression of Chiquita Corporation is obviously a huge win for the global working class, as well as for the environment. I agree. Let's expropriate Chiquita Corporation, and let's let people who live and work and want to work in production of food for people work and democratically control those institutions instead of having an absolutely evil poster child of American capitalism. But instead of being able to focus, this is the thing about the degrowth stuff, is like, instead of actually being able to focus on the enemy, right? It's weird shit about consumption. 7-Eleven, bananas in a 7-Eleven. Well, you know what, friend? Not try to moralize too much, but let's be honest here. If you don't know what poverty is like in this country, if you haven't lived in places that are food deserts, it's a really amazing thing to talk about in a country like the United States of America, where millions of people are unable to get adequate nutrition. And they say, you know what? I'm annoyed that there's vegetables and fruit at a gas station. Right? Yeah, I don't want there to, like, no more 7-Elevens under socialism, right? We don't need that private corporation. But yeah, do I want people to be able to easily access nutrition? Yes. I don't understand how this is controversial. And this last point here, and I mean, I want to, because we talk about it's a big controversy. I want to hear what you're saying, Matt. Sorry. I just know if I don't get it all out now, I'm going to forget. The last thing I'll say here is that, again, why I call this such a pessimistic philosophy is that, like, the banana production is extremely brutal for working people who work in that supply chain. I want to change that, right? But that's the banana production under capitalism, right? Which has a profit motive, which has waste built into it, which has like a lack of interest in providing these things at affordable or ideally decommodified free for people. I could definitely imagine what a socialist banana production, or any kind of, for the vast majority of goods and services that are out there, what that would look like under socialism. And this weird thing about, I know, and I don't want to fixate too much on the banana thing, but it's like bananas are like one of like carbon footprint, incredibly minimal compared to like other products, right? Like palm oil and things like that. Carbon, like limited in the amount of carbon that they produce just in the general sense, right? There's wasteful production, things like that. But putting bananas on a shipping boat, they last a really long time. That's why it's a global food stuff, because they last a long time, and you can ship them from the areas that grow bananas so that they can get, to Ohio, where somebody who is, might need some nutrition can get it. And just I brought that up because he says there need not be any moralism here. When you eat a banana, you are bad. So that's good. Don't feel bad about having a banana, but because it doesn't make any other than capitalist sense to create a world-spanning daily banana infrastructure for people in Columbus, Ohio. So no bananas for people in Ohio, right?
Well, there's the platform.
It's absurd politics, but like the economics and the ecology behind it are also silly. He notes here that we should we better get planting those pawpaw trees, right? Do you know what that is, Matt?
No.
It's a big like fixation of like the environmental movement, and I've known about it for kids because I grew up around a lot of hippies, right? It's like this story of a fruit that was, that is indigenous to America, that has fallen out of mass consumption. Well, actually, mass consumption, it was very often eaten by like Native Americans and indigenous cultures. It grows in parts of the East Coast and through parts of the Midwest. It's supposed to be really good. I've never had one. They're hard to find, right? Because they never built up mass pawpaw groves, right, to grow them and to distribute them. Do you know why, Matt? Shelf life is about 2 days, so it's not a very efficient form of food, which is why it's more something that, like, if you want to find it, you have to really search for it and maybe go to somebody who might have some growing near them, right? So it's not a reasonable thing. It's like, yeah, we're going to start growing papaw trees on a mass scale to have like 1-2 day shelf life foods. Just going to, I mean, like that's wasteful, right? That's extremely wasteful. The idea being that like, oh, well, everyone can have them and you can just grab them off the. Look, I'm all for that kind of thing. Like I'm very interested in food. I'm very interested in like things that have sort of fallen out of practice and favor. But like more for like a historical or an archaeological or maybe even a spiritual sense than actually like legitimately saying, no, we should get rid of like a staple of people's diets and replace them with something that we can't produce in mass. It's yeah, I've gone too much.
Yeah. I mean, I just have a few, like Donald Parkinson, who we had on from Cause.meg, had this tweet. I'm sorry. Well, it's a quote tweet of this guy. The
It's
fact that
another
even
fight, but it's like this also just like for people who are smart and are online, like this spurned like a whole host of fights, which is very
it's like
funny. I will
right,
say.
it
I'm
happens.
sure
It's
Malcolm
like
would find it funny too.
it flares up like yeah. The fact that even trivial changes to the absurdly Caligula's consumption of the average American is seen as a political non-starter. Fucking depressing, man. I don't know. Donald says, I'm sorry, but with no socialist movement with a mass base and with no possibility of a planned economy being implemented soon, why are we already dictating what common consumer goods we're going to be taking away? Why are people talking about this? And that's exactly right. Like a
Yeah.
non-starter, who's starting, motherfucker? Like this is a technocratic um, daydream that you're all having. And it's not actionable even if you wanted it to be. And to the extent that this is going to get any traction in mainstream politics, it's going to be you motherfuckers singled out. And I like a lot of you, but you're going to get singled out by fucking Marco Rubio or some motherfucker, and you're not going to know what hit you because you're going to make this shit look bad. Because like to be like, oh yeah, here's the politics, no more fruit. What the fuck? Like what are we talking about here? Maybe after the revolution, when we have international workers councils because we took over United Fruit Company, made it the Union World Union Fruit Company, there's going to be some issues getting certain things, there's shortages that we're all going to have to like democratically agree to, right? Let's cross that bridge maybe when we come to it.
Because look, this is a false framing, which is why like this is why this whole conversation pisses me off so much.
Yes.
The false framing is like, oh, these like stupid consumerist Americans can't imagine not having a banana. Therefore, we should scrap the entire socialist project. I will take that trade in a second. What the hell are you talking about? I would even give up all the things you accuse me of loving too much. Cheeseburgers, like I'd probably even stop eating meat if it legitimately like created
Communism?
socialism. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. But what I'm saying is what you're offering is not doing that. It will not do that. And all it does is say to people something that has been hit into their head since they were a kid, which is that socialism and communism means gray suits, less
Austerity.
food, and gruel. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So no, I think it's the only reason like like this is silly stuff generally. Like, these fights are like more goofy proxy wars between people, but this is fundamentally about whether or not we have like the vision and the backbone to say I want to fight for a better world, and I believe that it's possible. Right. There's something that like I love about Mark Fisher, right? Is that he calls capitalism realism, that like is easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism, right? And it's something that has psychologically been done to us as a people the world over. And I find degrowth to be a philosophy that's rooted in a pessimism that no, there is no way to imagine, for example, a sustainable and healthy banana production, or there is no way to make sure that we have technologies that have liberated people from the drudgery of work, oftentimes housework, like gendered housework, like washing machines and dishwashers, right? I mean, incredible amounts of free time, something that a socialist and something that degrowthers always say that we want more of, right? That has been given to people through technology. I think we should continue to utilize technology to make people's lives easier and, search as much as possible, find ways to do these in the most ecological one and as a ecological way possible. And on the second measure, and the most important one, find ways to break these chains of exploitation that harm people in the global South and in the United States of America as well. So yeah, I envision a better world. Like, call me nuts. But don't call me cynical because I think that we should have a better world. Y'all are the ones who are saying we need to have
Yes.
less. And the only thing that I'm hoping is the more and more public that this stuff gets, like the authors of The Future of Degrowth saying that they think that um, that pet ownership is akin to slavery, which they said on the Doug Henwood podcast. It's like, the point where I'm like, y'all lay out your thing with an interlocutor who's going to make you hold these positions that you take. Because for the vast majority of people who come across degrowth, they think it's, oh, we just want there to be less plastic crap, and we want there to be less waste in production, and it's a lot more cynical than that, friends.
Yeah. I have Bosco Sankara had a good comment on this
As he
too.
does, he always sort of is able to like get in these, but sort of stick his head above the muck, which I don't know.
Yeah,
I envy.
exactly. Yeah. He says abundance isn't capitalism's problem. It's the parts of life and social needs it neglects and the people it exploits. A key core socialist promise is we can have complex production on a global scale without exploitation.
Mm-hmm.